So there's a pretty provocative piece in Politico, and it has to do with Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's often talked about as a firebrand progressive in Congress, a freshman Democrat. The piece is titled AOC Breaks with Bernie on How to Lead the Left. And then the subheadline is The Congresswoman is declining to back primary challengers, following in her footsteps and working within the system in Congress. So there have been some decisions that Representative Ocasio-Cortez has made recently that kind of made me raise an eyebrow here or there. But, I think it's important to give her credit where credit is due, which is what we did last week when she spoke on the House floor about the massive bailouts to corporations that certainly don't deserve it in the stimulus bill. But there have been some tweaks in the way that she handles the so-called establishment and also some of the progressive primary challengers in the upcoming election. So in the piece, the writers at Politico argue, gone are her plans for a corporate-free caucus modeled on an uncompromising tactic of the Conservative Freedom Caucus. The goal then was to force leadership's hand to go further left. Then they write, after starting some high-profile fights with Speaker Nancy Pelosi early in her tenure, Ocasio-Cortez has dubbed Pelosi Mama Bear of the Democratic Party. And then there were other issues. So there are, things that she says. For instance, she was at one point somewhat critical of Bernie Sanders supporters and their behavior online. That made me raise an eyebrow. And then for me, it's also the actions, right? So there were two members of her staff that were incredibly progressive. They were firebrands themselves, people that she worked with through Justice Democrats, and she actually let them go. So Shoykat Chakrabarti is one of those people, and then Trent Corbin is the second person she let go. So I want to have a discussion, and I want it to be nuanced, because I think that it's wrong to just blow her off as someone who folded. But there are some decisions that she's making that are noticeable, right? And so is this a smart strategy to try to change the system from within the establishment? Or is she better suited to, fight the way that she did early on in her tenure?
Yeah, so there are definitely upsides and downsides to this strategy. But I want to clarify something right from the get-go. This is not a conversation about whether AOC is progressive enough. On all the issues and the policies so far, she has been very progressive and also aggressive in both her questioning in Congress, her speeches in Congress, and the legislation that she pushes for. So I don't want to get into not purity tests. That's nonsense talk that the mainstream media and establishment Democrats say, but into actual discussion of who's more progressive. I don't know if AOC is more progressive than Rashida Tlaib or vice versa, et cetera. So the most important thing is, what do you do in Congress? And so far, AOC has still been, I think, largely terrific on that. So important, really important context. Now, there is a difference of agreement, differences on strategy. And so, and within that context, there are things that are important and not important. So she calls Nancy Pelosi Mama Bear. She did it once. She did it on The View. It was nails on a chalkboard for me. Couldn't stand it. But I think overall, largely irrelevant. Okay, she said it once. Who cares? Let it go, right? Now, changing her staff, relevant, because those folks were people who were, more in the revolutionary camp. Are we going to change the party? Are we going to take over the Democratic Party? Or are we all going to get along? So is that relevant? Yes. Have I worked with those folks? Yes. Are they real progressives, but also real, we say revolutionaries. What do we mean by that? Really change the system so that it's uncorrupted. It doesn't run on corporate money. It runs on people power. Did Shoykat and Corbyn believe that? Do they still believe that? Absolutely. Would I have kept their counsel? I would have, and I have through hard times when we have disagreed at times vehemently, right? So I think that's real. But the most real thing is primaries. So and here Politico was actually too fair to Bernie Sanders.
Hmm.
Bernie doesn't often support progressives in primaries either when they're taking on Democratic incumbents. Now, I'm in a tough position to say that because Bernie did endorse me when I ran for Congress, which I deeply appreciate. There was a whole nonsense of the unendorsement, but I honestly don't care about that at all. I thought Bernie was courageous in taking a chance on me, so I deeply, deeply appreciate it. But I was not running against an incumbent, right? And so when you look at it, AOC and Bernie's record are fairly similar in the primary challenges that they support, and I disagree with both of them. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not personal. I love Bernie, and obviously AOC and I had a great relationship. I don't know if my critique of hers offends her or not, but that's her issue to deal with. But it's the wrong strategy. It's if you, in my opinion, saying, well, we're going to work with our incumbent friends. Your incumbent friends are never, ever, ever going to agree with you on Green New Deal or Medicare for All, and just trying to coax them along hasn't worked, and in my opinion, is never going to work. What really matters is power. Primaries matter because it challenges their power, and yes, it makes them uncomfortable, and yes, it scares them. It's supposed to, so that they vote the right way, meaning not my way, but the way of their actual constituents. Almost all their constituents in these Democratic districts want Medicare for all. Almost the great majority of them want Green New Deal. If you don't challenge them with primaries, they're never going to change because they're just going to listen to their corporate donors. And ain't no amount of tea or beer that you could have in Washington that's going to change that.
So the way that I see it is we are in this unprecedented situation where we have a perfect opportunity as progressives who want to fight for single payer healthcare, for instance, to really highlight how the system has failed us. It's made us more vulnerable to something like a pandemic, right? This is a moment where we can make our case strongly for Medicare for all, for an economic system that's more equal. And instead of doing that, what I'm noticing is that progressives are kind of starting to, like, I guess, relax. And this is not the time to relax. Joe Biden, I did a live video on this today. Joe Biden was being interviewed by MSNBC, and he was asked, hey, do you think that if we had single payer healthcare, we would be in a better situation to combat COVID-19? And he argued no. But keep in mind that we have people right now in America who are being turned away from urgent care hospitals because they don't have health insurance. There was a story about a teenager in California who got turned away due to a lack of insurance. He later went into cardiac arrest. He had COVID-19 and he died. So those stories are real, and we should be highlighting them to point to just how incredibly flawed this system is. I feel like this moment is not being used at all right now by progressives. And it's like, it really blows my mind because you're right, Cenk. I think that the policies, if you poll the electorate, are popular, but we need to think about the right strategy to pursue in order to really get that message across and let Americans know, hey, you don't need to be afraid to vote for the candidates that want to champion these policies. Instead, we're having this ridiculous conversation about trying to change the establishment from within. Look, the corporate money and the Republican Party has been so successful in shifting the Democratic Party to the right. We talk about the Overton window all the time. And guess what? Change is not easy. So pushing the Democratic Party to the left is going to take a lot of difficult conversations, a lot of fights, right? And a lot of intimidation, I'm sure, from the so-called establishment. But this is our moment. And if we don't take advantage of it right now, and if we don't primary people who support this broken system right now, then when do we have an appropriate time to push forward with progressive ideas?
Let's make both sides of the case one more time, but in this context, different issue, which is legislation. So, and it affects electoral politics as well. So, for example, Bernie Sanders, there was an argument to be made after 2016 that he should have reached out to the moderates a lot more, not in changing any of his policies, but they care about personal relationships. So this is making AOC's case for her, which is, look, these relationships matter. And at the end of the day, whether they endorse you or not matters. And whether they are going to vote with you or not matters. And so Maybe Bernie should have had 20 lunches with Jim Clyburn between 2016 and 2020, and not promised him anything in terms of policy, but just been a friendly guy. And then maybe it might have made a difference. Maybe it would have not necessarily gotten Clyburn to endorse Bernie Sanders in South Carolina, but at least stopped him from endorsing Joe Biden. I don't know if that's possible, but a case could be made for it. And then Bernie could have maybe changed his rhetoric against same policies, but in a way that comforted moderates. That there's a case to be made for that. There's also a case to be made to say, no, he should have gone to war and been much tougher against the establishment. I think those are both interesting cases to make. And if AOC is pursuing that path of being more open to the moderates in order to get them to our side, I get it. And I think that there could be value in it depending on the situation. But now let's look at what's actually happening. Is there any vote for Medicare for All or a Green New Deal? I don't mean who's voting for it. I mean, are they actually going to vote? Now, this is what I've been saying from day one in this congressional term, which is, guys, they're never going to vote on it. And at the beginning, people were like, oh, no, Cenk, don't be silly. Of course, so many people ran on Medicare for All and Green New Deal. They'll at least have a vote on it because now the Democrats control the House. No, they won't. And if Biden wins, you think they're going to have a vote on it? Nope, it's gone. It's gone for 4 long years. Will AOC and the others force a vote? So far, they haven't. So far, they haven't done anything to do that. And now, because they have fans that are actually progressives, now I see people pushing back and saying, oh, no, Cenk, the smart thing is to not ever have a vote. We got to have a vote, but it's later. Wait a minute. That's the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. That's what I hear from the establishment. That later means never. That's what that coded language means, right? And that's not tough to decipher. So just as a matter of strategy, do I believe that AOC wants Medicare for All and Green New Deal with all of her heart? Yes, I do believe that. Do I think she has the right strategy? And by the way, it's not just about her. All these folks that I love, Ro Khanna, Rashida Tlaib, Pramila Jayapal, I believe that they earnestly, genuinely, definitely want those things with a passion. But where's their strategy for forcing votes? And if you're not going to force a vote this time and you're not going to force a vote next time if Biden wins, wait a minute, when do we ever goddamn vote? and that is a slow path to oblivion. And look, I
have to add one thing to that, Cenk, because keep in mind that right now, I mean, we did a story last week about how 3.3 million Americans filed for unemployment in 1 week. Right. And I'm sure that number is going to continue increasing. And we've been sold snake oil by corporate media about how, oh, no, Americans love their employer provided health insurance. Well, now that all these people have been laid off, they've lost their jobs. How do they like their employer provided health insurance now? Right. And the reason why I bring that up is because now is the moment. If we don't take advantage of this moment, then it's just never going to happen. Because we see, like, people feel it on a very personal and visceral level. And if we can't make our case now, then we'll never make our case. That's where I'm coming from.
100%. I actually think it is a great moment for Bernie to do a massive policy speech on Medicare for All. And if AOC is going to be the next leader, as folks are saying, great, then she should make the speech. And by the way, I believe she can and she will, and she'd probably do a fantastic job at it. And so, look, if I wanted to be savvy politically and cared about my own career, reputation, et cetera, I'd play ball. I mean, if you don't have progressive allies, then you don't have any allies. You think I don't know the consequences of if I offend anyone, including progressives? But I do it anyway because my job is to push them. And if I don't push them, nobody's going to push them. And so it's our job collectively to say, as we did with Obama, if you remember, right? And a lot of people were mad at us after Obama. We helped Obama get elected. We had a very small, tiny role in it, but we did our best, right? And then we turned around and held him accountable. That's what our job is. And people said, you shouldn't hold them accountable. No, because Fox News attacks them. You can't also critique them from the left. Wrong again. So that's our job to do that. And look, in that light, I'll say one more thing. If people are saying, hey, AOC is smarter than you in politics, and maybe that's very, very true, right? And so she's being judicious with how she does endorsements in primaries. Well, that's also true. She is being judicious, and I'm never judicious. I will endorse and help progressive primary challengers, even if I think they have no chance, because I do it on principle, and I do it because I think, well, sometimes there's a young woman taking on the fourth most powerful Democrat in the country, and everyone else thinks she has no chance, but I think she has a chance, and I'm going to help her. And so, again, I don't know how much I helped, we helped, you guys helped as the Young Turks audience, but we tried, and we tried our best. Mm-hmm. And so after you win a race like that, because people believed in you, and they thought taking on Democratic incumbents could make a difference for progressives, I got to be honest, I think you have an extra responsibility to then do likewise after you cross that bridge. If after you cross the bridge, go, hey, man, these are my beloved, cherished colleagues, well, that's the same rationale that would have prevented anyone from helping AOC. That is Joe Crowley. That is their cherished colleague. They've got to do business with Joe Crowley. They've got to compromise with Joe Crowley. You can't upset Joe Crowley by running a primary challenge from a progressive against them, especially one that has no chance of winning. Young Turks, you're so unsavvy. It's not that we would have heard that. We did hear that. So yes. I'm hoping that AOC gets on a path that helps other progressives. She does help some, no question. Jessica Cisneros and Marie Newman, she endorsed, even though they were running against incumbents. I have to be honest, I think that was fairly easy. Those two incumbents are pretty much Republicans posing as Democrats, and everyone knows it. Even Emily's list was on their side. And she's helped people that I love, like Cara Eastman and then Georgette Gomez as well. And those are really important progressives, but they're running against non-incumbents. There are many others that need her help. We could, and if people want to critique us and say, oh, Cenk, you're not strong enough, powerful enough, I say guilty as charged. You're right. I want to help Morgan Harper more. I want to help Jamal Bowman more. These are wonderful progressive Democrats who are Justice Democrats. We need to get them as much help as possible. And could Bernie Sanders help them more? Yes. Could AOC help them more? Yes.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.